Hello out there, greetings mateys, and welcome aboard the VHS pirate ship. Be sure to hit that subscribe button.
Smash that button
so you can see all the action, all the adventure, all the drama, and all the excitement here on the VHS pirate ship. So join the crew, hit subscribe. Thank you for tuning in, and enjoy the show. Greetings, mateys. It's me, Captain Adam, and welcome aboard me VHS pirate ship. It's the VHS pirate ship. Pirate ship! And today, we're finishing the saga of the journey of Jim Varney with Exploring Ernest Tapes, Part 2. So enjoy the show. Yarr! Hello and welcome to Part 2 of Exploring Ernest Tapes. If you have yet to see Exploring Ernest Tapes Part 1, I highly recommend that you do so. So, picking up from where I left off, Ernest Saves Christmas was a smash hit, and 1988 was proving to be a very good year for Ernest P. Worrell. By this time, Jim Varney had done 3 different movies, and the Ernest P. Worrell character was becoming more popular by the minute. And proof positive of this was the fact that Ernest had his own Saturday morning show with Hey Vern, It's Ernest, which was a sketch comedy show that debuted in September of 1988. So in 1988, not only was Jim Varney getting ready to celebrate his 3rd movie, but he also had his own television show. And that show didn't last very long. Its last show was in December of 1988. It was only 1 season and only had 13 episodes. But the show did feature a lot of familiar characters, like Chuck and Bobby were in it, the Auntie character was in it, Dr. Otto and his robot, and even Sergeant Glory is in it. Now, if you don't know who Sergeant Glory is, he was one of Jim Varney's first characters that he would use in commercials. I think it's kind of odd that they used Dr. Otto in a kid's show. I mean, the Dr. Otto movie wasn't exactly not for kids, but it also wasn't for kids, if that makes any sense. I don't know, it just seems kind of weird. Still not as bad as when they made Toxic Avenger a damn cartoon. What a terrible choice. I mean, Toxic Avenger is not, under any circumstance, a kid's movie or for kids. Hell, I know some adults who shouldn't even see it. But that's what trauma movies are. They're just not for everybody. And they're certainly not for kids. I don't care if it is a spin-off and you change the name from Toxic Avenger to Toxic Crusaders. It's the principle of the thing. And plus, yeah, there was VHS for this too. But I mean, hey, there was also a RoboCop cartoon. RoboCop is not for kids at all. And there was a Rambo cartoon. I mean, it's the same thing. I mean, why would you make a cartoon about that? I don't know. Anyway, okay, so the Hey Vern, It's Ernest show wasn't all that successful, but 1988, 1989, 1990, very successful years for Jim Varney, and you're about to find out. And Hey Vern, It's Ernest would be released on VHS in 1988 by Deke Home Video. You know, Deke, the production company that was behind a lot of kid shows and cartoons where all the kids would giggle at because it looks like it says Dick. So yeah, Deke was the original distributor of the Hey Vern, It's Ernest VHS collection, and they were released again by Good Times Home Video in 1992. And Good Times Home Video must have acquired all the non-Touchstone Ernest property in 1992, because in the same year they also released Dr. Otto, The Riddle of the Gloom Beam, Hey Vern, It's My Family album, and the Ernest commercials. And just like all the other Ernest VHS, the Hey Vern, It's Ernest collection goes for a lot of money today.
Big old money.
And speaking of big old money, the Hey Vern, It's Ernest TV show even had some merchandise in the form of a talking Ernest doll. And take a look what these are going for today. There's one in the box going for $400. Of course, it was signed by Jim Varney.
Big old money.
And here's another one going for $285, and a loose one going for $78. Man, Ernest merchandise is straight up gold. And just like the other Ernest material, the Hey Vern, It's Ernest show was produced by John Cherry. And just like the other Ernest material, they would use the same actors. Look, the barber is Daniel Butler, the same guy who played Eddie in Ernest Goes to Camp and one of the animal control officers in Ernest Saves Christmas. And look, it's Jackie Welch. She was in Dr. Otto, she was in Ernest Goes to Camp, and she was one of the animal control officers in Ernest Saves Christmas. This is a reoccurring theme through all the Ernest movies. So anyways, yeah, 1988 was a very good year for Jim Varney, and he would close out that year by co-hosting a New Year's Eve special on television. So we've seen how the 80s treated Jim Varney and the Ernest character, but what did the 90s have in store for him? Well, Vern, we're gonna find out on today's episode, part 2 of Exploring Ernest Tapes. The year 1990. It was the dawn of a new decade, the start of a new era. Things were on the up and up, and Ernest would wind up in jail. And we would find out how with the release of Ernest Goes to Jail, which was released in theaters April 6, 1990. And compared to the other Ernest movies so far, this one is actually kind of hard to explain. You see, Ernest, who works as a nighttime janitor at a bank, was called for jury duty for the trial of Reuben Bartlett, who is an inmate at the Dracup Correctional Facility and is accused of killing another inmate. And here's where it gets a bit complicated. You see, Bartlett is a crony of career criminal and death row inmate Felix Nash, who we find out later looks exactly like Ernest. And at the trial, Reuben Bartlett notices this and then tells his lawyer. And this lawyer must also be Felix Nash's lawyer, because then they devise a plan to break Nash out of prison. Now, why a lawyer would help his client break out of jail is beyond me, but you just kind of go with it. And so then the lawyer asks the judge if they can take the trial to the scene of the crime, the Dracup Correctional Facility, opening the door for Nash to switch places with Ernest. Now, in reality, this would probably never happen, as a judge would never approve such a thing, but again, you just go with it. Now, if you have been keeping up with the Ernest movies, you may have noticed that the lawyer that Reuben and Nash have is the same lawyer that Crater had in Ernest Goes to Camp. Or at least it's portrayed by the same actor. Now that raises a few questions. Is Ernest Goes to Jail a sequel to Ernest Goes to Camp, and is this the same lawyer? In part 1, I had mentioned that none of the Ernest movies are sequels to each other, and they're all just their own thing. But it could be said that these two movies are sequels to each other, though they never really elaborate, and we may be overcomplicating something that's already surprisingly complicated. So anyway, the scheme works, and now Ernest is in jail, and Nash is running free disguised as Ernest. And this character is another testament to Jim Varney's acting ability. Even though he doesn't alter his appearance very much, you're totally convinced he's a different person and not Ernest whatsoever. And that's just straight up brilliant acting, because just think about it, all he did was take his ball cap off, and now he's someone completely different. And this is all Jim Varney. Just think about it. Not only is he playing Ernest, but he's also doing Ernest pretending to be Nash, and then he's doing Nash, but then also doing Nash pretending to be Ernest. It's sort of mind-boggling. This had to be exhausting. But not only that, Jim Varney also portrays the auntie character in this movie too, in a very elaborate scheme to break out of prison, which almost works. And anytime Jim Varney does the auntie character, it's hilarious. It's gotta be my favorite character of his. And one of the more stranger aspects of this movie is the subplot. You see, every time Ernest gets electrocuted, he becomes magnetized, and eventually he gets electrocuted so much that he gains electric powers. Electrocution would do serious harm or kill a mere mortal man. But we're not talking about a mere mortal man, we're talking about Ernest P. Worrell. And this is the only Ernest movie where he gains superpowers. And he gains his electric powers after he was supposedly put to death in the electric chair, but that only made him stronger, at least temporarily. I mean, hey, he was supposed to be dead, but he wasn't. And in fact, he was just fine. And suddenly my League of Extraordinary Gentlemen tie-in from Exploring Ernest Tapes Part 1 doesn't seem all that far-fetched. I would say this movie is my favorite of the Ernest films. And Chuck and Bobby are in this one too, as security guards in the same bank that Ernest works at. And a new addition to the Ernest world is Rimshot, his little dog. And you may have noticed that Daniel Butler and Jackie Welch are in this movie too. And also Tex Cobb is in this movie as Lyle, Ernest's cellmate. Tex Cobb is probably best known for his work as the bounty hunter in Raising Arizona, which was a great character and it was a great movie. Now you could say that Lyle is actually the bounty hunter's brother, even though in Raising Arizona the bounty hunter explains that he was sold on the black market as a baby. So maybe not, but you know, still kind of fun to think about. So anyway, Ernest Goes to Jail was released on VHS later on in 1990. And then again in 94 and 96. And these are very easy to find today, and usually you can find them for around $5 to $7. The Ernest movies just aren't as rare as the early Ernest stuff. And just like my copy of the Ernest Film Festival, I found an old rental copy of this at a thrift store for $1. And by the way, I also found an old rental copy of Ernest Saves Christmas, but I failed to mention this in part 1 because I'm a moron. Ernest Goes to Jail is a great movie. It's even got a great opening credit sequence, and it's a very stylized movie, from the lighting in the prison to the prison guards' uniforms. It's all just pretty unique. Not to mention that it's an extremely funny movie, like the scene when Ernest is in the jury box and he's chewing on his pen and his pen breaks and he gets ink all over his face. It's just, man, that's just great stuff. And Ernest Goes to Jail was a huge hit at the box office, so 1990 was turning out to be pretty good for old Ernest. So up to this point, Ernest had engaged in guerrilla warfare, had flown Santa's sleigh and saved Christmas, and had temporarily gained superpowers. But how would he fare when fighting the forces of evil? Captain Adam's VHS pirate ship will return after this. Get ready to confess to fun.
At the Spanish Inquisition Fun Park.
It's like medieval times, but only more accurate.
Because here, you won't be treated like royalty.
Because chances are,
You are a shit-covered peasant just like the rest of us.
ride the new Iron Maiden torture coaster.
Torture coaster.
Or ride the Rack and Roll and get stretched beyond belief.
Rock and roll.
And be sure to check out our new exciting midway.
And get some funnel cake. So come have a good time at Spanish Inquisition Fun Park.
Confess to fun. Discount tickets available at participating Cowboy Pork Chops, Choke and Puke family restaurants.
Confess
To fun at the Spanish Inquisition Fun Park. Join the fun on Channel 1. Tonight on Channel 1, don't miss a new episode of everybody's favorite half-horse, half-robot, half-cop, RoboClop. RoboClop has a tie-breaking vote on the Senate floor. Will it be a yay or will it be a nay? And then on an all-new Night Goose, the vampiric goose who spends his nights fighting crime in the big city. Night Goose finally confronts his nemesis, Frankenswan, and Night Goose discovers that they might not be enemies after all. That's RoboClop at 8, Night Goose at 9. Only on Channel 1. Join the fun on Channel 1. Channel 1! Hey there, folks, it's me, Little Vino. And did you fuck your car up somehow? Maybe the engine's running rough because you haven't changed the oil in 3 goddamn years. Or maybe it's overheating because heaven forbid you check your antifreeze. Or maybe you need a new tire because you hit a curb because you were texting while you were driving. Like a fucking moron. Either way, your vehicle's fucked up, and I'm sure it's your fault. But I ain't here to judge. I'm just here to fix your car and take your money and serve you a nice cheesesteak while you wait. So come on down to Little Vino's Auto Repair and Cheesesteak Emporium. We do all sorts of automotive repair and got lots of cheesesteaks. And for a limited time only, we'll give you an oil change and refill your blinker fluid. Because a lot of you morons must be out of blinker fluid because you don't use your blinkers.
Use your fucking blinkers.
So come on down to Little Vino's Automotive Repair and Cheesesteak Emporium. Just because you're a fucking moron doesn't mean your taste buds are. Little Vino's Automotive Repair
And Cheesesteak Emporium.
We now return you to Captain Adam's VHS pirate ship. Okay, so think of your monster movie archetypes for a second. You got your vampires, you got your werewolves, you got your mummies, you got your zombies. But how about trolls? Is trolls on that list? Not really, huh? Now, there have been a very few movies that featured trolls in the main monster role, but not many, which is funny because trolls have been a part of folklore for a very long time. And also, they were featured in Willow and also in the Lord of the Rings movies, but that's not really the same kind of movie, and it's not really the same kind of troll. I'm talking about a troll as the main antagonist. So if you've ever said to yourself, gee, I wish there was more troll movies, and I wonder what it would be like if Ernest were to fight trolls, then I have got the movie for you. It's Ernest Scared Stupid, which was released in theaters October 11th, 1991. And this is probably the most unique Ernest movie, because in this one, he's not trying to stop a mining corporation from destroying a camp, or he's not trying to save Christmas, or he's not trying to break out of jail. He's fighting trolls. He's fighting monsters, which is certainly a different idea and definitely unexpected out of an Ernest movie. And the story doesn't really center around Ernest. It really revolves around Trantor, the troll warlord. You see, ages ago, one of Ernest's ancestors, Phineas Worrell, actually captured and imprisoned Trantor the troll. Trantor then places a curse on the Worrell family, stating that each descendant would be dumber and dumber, which explains why Ernest is the way he is. And flash forward 100 years later, when Ernest inadvertently releases Trantor, where he's then free to wreak havoc on the town and collects souls to gain power to raise his troll army. And when he collects the souls, he turns the person into a little wooden doll, which he keeps for a memento, which is pretty dark for an Ernest movie. Which is one of the aspects that makes this film so notable, is that it breaches genres, where even the most die-hard horror movie fan is like, fuck yeah, man, Ernest Scared Stupid rules. But despite all the fanfare this film has nowadays, this movie did poorly at the box office, which is surprising and unfortunate considering the budget this film had, what with all the effects and stuff. So the box office results didn't match what the film should have made, and Touchstone Pictures decided not to extend the contract for more Ernest movies. So that's just a mathematical, analytical analysis. But what about the real deal for this movie? How did the fans feel about this movie? Well, they love it, mainly because of the concept of this Ernest movie. You see, it's not just some zany, wacky segment one after another. It's an action movie. It's an adventure movie. It's a mild horror movie. It's borderline science fiction. And speaking of that, Ernest Goes to Jail really should be a science fiction movie. Just because of the Electro Man segments, they could play it on the Sci-Fi Channel. I mean, come on. They played Field of Dreams on the Sci-Fi Channel once. They could easily do this. If they played a rock block on the Sci-Fi Channel of Ernest Goes to Jail and Ernest Scared Stupid, you're telling me you wouldn't watch it? Of course you would. Everybody would. But anyway, back to Trolls. So yeah, Trantor is running free, turning kids into wooden dolls and collecting their souls, and he does succeed in raising his troll army, and there's only one man who can stop them. Ernest P. Worrell. Mainly because he tells everybody about it, but nobody believes him because everybody thinks he has mental problems. So Ernest would take the fight to the trolls. It's what his ancestors would have wanted. And this movie once again would highlight Jim Varney's acting chops, as he does a multitude of characters, even during a battle scene with the trolls, because at its core, it's still an Ernest movie, but now it's also an action movie. There's great dynamics in this movie, but Ernest doesn't fight the trolls alone. He enlists the help of Old Lady Hackmore, played by Eartha Kitt. Yeah, Eartha Kitt's in this movie. I mean, everybody was surprised about that. And she does an awesome job playing a mystical, batshit crazy old woman. And it was good to see her. I mean, up to this point, most of us haven't seen her since she played Catwoman. And this movie's also great because Chuck and Bobby are in it. Oh, that's right. It's Tom and Bobby. Okay, so you know the feeling that when you're watching The Three Stooges, but then you realize it's one of the episodes with Joe? This is kind of how that feels. It's definitely a case of Sammy Hagar syndrome. Okay, so Tom and Bobby are in it, and if you're like me and everybody else in the world, you're like, who the fuck is Tom? Yeah, so who the hell is Tom anyway? We were so used to seeing Chuck and Bobby in Ernest movies, so what's up with this guy? I mean, Bobby is the same character, it's Bobby, so where's Chuck? More than likely, the actor who portrays Chuck, Gaylord Sarton, was too busy counting that fried green tomatoes money. But no, seriously, Fried Green Tomatoes was released in 1991 as well, and he was probably just too busy with that to do this movie. But you gotta hand it to John Cherry. Instead of just replacing the actor and keeping the same character, he made a whole new character. And though Tom and Bobby will never be as good as Chuck and Bobby, there still is some interesting points to this. You see, Chuck is Bobby's brother, and they specify in this film that Tom is Bobby's brother as well. And we also find out what their last names are. It's Tulip. It's Chuck and Bobby Tulip and Tom and Bobby Tulip. So I guess it's Chuck, Bobby, and Tom, which I'm really glad they just made a new character instead of just making a new Chuck. I hate it when movies replace the actor but keep the same character. Major League 2. Anyways, you will notice some familiar faces from other Ernest movies in Ernest Scared Stupid. Yep, good old Daniel Butler is in this one too, and he actually plays a bigger role than he normally does. And hey look, there's Jackie Welch. And look, there's Larry Black. We haven't seen him in an Ernest movie since he played Mr. Tipton in Ernest Goes to Camp. And hey, Rimshot is in this movie too. And just like Ernest Goes to Jail, this movie has a great opening credit sequence. And at the beginning of the movie, Jim Varney portrays Phineas Worrell, the Ernest ancestor that imprisoned Trantor. And once again, it's Jim Varney playing another character and proving how awesome he is. So anyways, Ernest Scared Stupid was released on VHS in 1992, and then again in 1996. And they are easy to find today, but they can be pretty pricey. I mean, come on man, $50? And so Ernest Scared Stupid would mark the end of Touchstone Pictures' relationship with the Ernest franchise. And therefore, that must mean that there won't be any more Ernest movies, right? Wrong. And we got another Ernest movie with the release of Ernest Rides Again, which was released in theaters November 12th, 1993, and nobody gave a shit. And the box office for this was abysmal. You see, the film was made at a budget of $7 million, but only took in about $1.5 million. The movie is about this cannon that's from the Revolutionary War, and there's jewels in it, and people are looking for it. I don't know. It's an Ernest movie that never should have been made, and you can just tell that Jim Varney did not want to do Ernest anymore. It must have been how Christopher Lee felt about playing Dracula for the umpteenth time for the Hammer films. But Ernest Rides Again is what it is, and this would be the last release of an Ernest film in theaters. And this was released on VHS April 27, 1994, and even featured a Mr. Bill short. And that's it. That's right. There's no more Ernest movies to talk about. Nope, that's it. There's no more Ernest movies. Oh man, I guess I gotta talk about these, don't I? Yep, to any Ernest fan, there's Ernest movies, and then there's the other Ernest movies. And I'm talking about the mid-90s straight-to-video Ernest movies. And much like Ernest Rides Again, these Ernest movies just should not exist. They're abominations. I mean, come on, once you feature an Ernest movie where Ernest fights trolls, you've kind of jumped the shark. Where else can you go from there? You shouldn't go anywhere else, but instead we get Ernest Goes to School, Ernest Goes to Africa, Ernest Joins the Army, and Slam Dunk Ernest. I mean, these movies would have been out of place when Ernest was at his most popular, let alone knee-deep in the 90s. I mean, the stories aren't well written, the production quality is way down. I mean, they're making me be critical about Ernest movies, and I just don't feel right about doing that. These movies are dog shit, and I hate to say that because they're Ernest movies. There's just something about these movies that I don't like. They don't feel right. I can't put my finger on it, but I just can't stand them. And other Ernest fans feel the same way. I mean, there's people that don't even acknowledge these films. And it's not just because they were direct-to-video. I mean, Ernest Rides Again had a theatrical release, and Ernest fans simply can't stand that movie. And besides, direct-to-video doesn't always mean a bad thing. Just because a movie went right to video doesn't necessarily mean it's bad. Just like if a movie is released in theaters, doesn't necessarily mean it's good. I mean, Mortal Kombat Annihilation was released in theaters, and I went to see it. I'm telling you, that movie makes any Ed Wood film look like fucking Dr. Zhivago. But anyways, yes, these so-called Ernest movies were direct-to-video. I don't know, they're just terrible. Even though it's still Jim Varney, it's a different Ernest. He just doesn't act the same. I mean, you can definitely tell that Jim Varney does not want to do Ernest anymore. And I can't say that I blame him. I mean, hell, at this point, he's been doing the character for 15 years. This is simply a case of going to the well one too many times. And by scraping this franchise over more bread than the butter can handle, it succeeded in cheapening a beloved character. So let's examine what is the problem with these movies. It's not like anybody didn't want to see Ernest anymore. It's just that we were satisfied with what we already had. And so to any Ernest fan, there really only is the big four movies, with Ernest Goes to Camp, Ernest Saves Christmas, Ernest Goes to Jail, and Ernest Scared Stupid. That's all we wanted. That's all we needed. That's all we should have. But no, we have these other pieces of shit, and I certainly hope that if somebody wants to get into Ernest movies, they don't start with one of these. It just really makes you wish that Ernest Scared Stupid did better at the box office, and Touchstone Pictures didn't drop them, and we could have gotten at least 2 more good Ernest movies. I mean, how about Ernest Goes to Oz? Or wouldn't everybody shit if there was a Pee Wee Herman and Ernest P. Worrell crossover movie? Yes, they would. And it would be shitty pants all over the world. I can smell it now. But alas, that will never happen. And you see, we are intrinsically at fault for these shitty Ernest movies, because had more of us gone to see Ernest Scared Stupid when it was in theaters, Touchstone Pictures wouldn't have dropped the contract, and we would have gotten a few more good Ernest movies, and these direct-to-video pieces of shit would never have been made. And I know that there is an alternate timeline, parallel universe, where this actually happened. And perhaps I'm getting a bit too passionate about this, but it is a sad end to the Ernest character. It should have all ended with Ernest Scared Stupid, but it didn't. And we have to move on from that. And speaking of Ernest Scared Stupid, after Ernest discovers that milk kills the trolls, he then goes to the grocery store to get lots of milk. And did you notice it was Purity Dairy Milk? A little throwback to his commercial days? I thought that was pretty cool. Anyway, Ernest is a legendary man, a legendary character who will never die. And Jim Varney is a great actor who's done more things than just Ernest, even though that's really all you would need. But he did more. like when he starred in the 1983 TV show The Rousters, where he played a descendant of Wyatt Earp and acted kind of like Ernest, but he wasn't Ernest, but you could tell that he was sort of honing in the Ernest character. And this would eventually be released on VHS, and you could tell that they were using the Ernest image to market the thing. And I have this VHS, and I never even knew this show existed. And the show's weird. It's bad, but you can't really tell why. It's just written so sporadically. There's so many things going on. And it's not like the acting's bad. You got Jim Varney. You got the guy who played one of the Fratelli brothers in the Goonies, and also the police chief in Predator 2. You got the guy who played the dad in Gremlins, and you also got the guy who played Hunter. I don't know, it's just a weird show. But anyway, it's a must-have for any Jim Varney collector. And speaking of TV shows, he would also have a guest spot on Roseanne. And aside from the Ernest movies, the other movie that Jim Varney is best known for is the Beverly Hillbillies, which was released in 1993, and Jim Varney steals the show, which makes you wonder if they couldn't have gotten Jim Varney, would they even have made this movie? Probably not. And then there's 1989's Fast Food, where he starred alongside Tracy Lords, and I think we all know who she is. And it's strange that Jim Varney and Tracy Lords are in a movie together. And the VHS of this is kinda easy to find. You can usually find one for around $12, or you can go with the Japanese version for $90.
Big old money.
Oh, and not to mention, in 1994, he did a comedy special called Your World as I See It, which is a collection of shorts hosted by Astor Clement. That's right, Astor Clement from Ernest Saves Christmas. Though it's not really the same Astor Clement from Ernest Saves Christmas. He's a bit more snobby in this one. And it's a showcase on Jim Varney's acting ability, as he does an entire cadre of characters. Though it's not really his best work, but it's still cool to have, and you can find this on VHS. And then there's 1999's Existo, the Forbidden Movie, which is sort of like a demented Ernest movie reunion because it has a lot of the same players, like Jackie Welch, Gaylord Sarton, and Bruce Arnston, who plays Existo, which is funny because he played Existo the Magician on Hey Vern, It's Ernest, the TV show. And he also composed the music for most of the Ernest movies. And this is definitely not like an Ernest movie. It's what they call a Z movie. It just has a lot of the same cast members. And yeah, Jim Varney was in Snowboard Academy, which was released in 1997. And you know, for some reason, I can't find the VHS for anything under $15. I mean, what the hell? And then 1997 would also find Jim Varney in the movie 100 Proof, which is a drama and a thriller and another testament to Jim Varney's acting chops. Because ever since Ernest Goes to Jail, when he portrayed Felix Nash, I always wondered what it would be like if he played more bad guys and more serious roles. Jim Varney could have been a villain in a Die Hard movie. I mean, the man just had such an extensive career, and apparently he was a great guy too. Like, he would dress up as Ernest and go to children's hospitals, stuff like that. He was a great actor, he was a great guy, he had a great career, all the way up until he passed away in February of 2000. And I remember being heartbroken when I heard the news. It was a big deal. It reminded you of when John Candy passed away. And you were sad because in your heart, you knew the world would just never be the same. But Jim Varney certainly left a lasting legacy behind. And we'll always have Ernest. And Ernest will always be with us. So this concludes Exploring Ernest Tapes. So I hope you enjoyed the show. And be sure to hit subscribe. And I'll see you next time on Captain Adam's VHS Pirate Ship.